Welcome to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zorkel Profiles. Along with my co host, community advocate, speaker, and author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. Today's special guest is Nicole Salla. She's a Chief Marketing Officer at Kiddie Academy Educational Childcare. Nicole joined Kiddie Academy in 2017 to lead the overall brand and marketing strategy for one of the nation's fastest growing franchisors. She's a strategic business and marketing executive that thrives on leading with a servant spirit, empathetic heart, and mentorship mentality. Nicole has a love for the art, science, and psychology of marketing and brings a unique blend of strategic planning, brand development, operation sales, creative production, and analytical experience to her approach. She holds a master's degree in business management and marketing and was named one of Entrepreneur's most influential women in franchising in 2022. Wowza. Nicole, it's so good to have you here.
Thank you both for having me on today.
This is going to be fun. I can feel it. I can feel it.
Great conversation. What a great, fabulous intro. And a little birdie told us that you have this big, audacious goal of delivering a TED Talk in 2023, something along the lines of anxiety as your superpower. Tell us where this stemmed from.
Sure, absolutely. That is one of my big goals. Anxiety has a bad word. It's a bad word. I know that a lot of people experience anxiety, and it's really my goal to let people know how to use that as their superpower. Where I think it came from for me is I grew up in an incredibly loving family, but we had a lot of change throughout my childhood. I lived in at least 15 houses between my mom and my dad before I graduated high school. It was a lot of change. It was, where are we moving to next? We weren't in the military. It was simply because we had to move around a lot my mom had multiple jobs at the same time. My parents were divorced when I was 8 years old. So for us, some of those things precipitated change. And so picking up and moving was normal to us. And that creates a lot of stress in some ways, things that I didn't even realize until I got to older in my life, and talking to people about it, go, wow, that's where I think I really have a problem sitting still. And the way that it manifests in me is I can't sit still. I'm constantly trying to anticipate change and constantly moving to keep busy. But the problem is it manifests itself sometimes in very negative thoughts. So anxiety, you think about anxiety, it's about worrying about what's in the future and obsessing and thinking about that. And that worry that it creates. But really, there is a way to turn that into a positive superpower. And my goal is to help show people how to channel that negative energy and turn it into something positive.
I never in a million years would have thought of anxiety as a superpower. So you're going to have to convince me of this. This is really an interesting topic. And it's also interesting how the many changes in your life likely cause this anxiety nature that you have. Do you think it also caused you to be more adaptable?
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that it taught me is that, you can be adaptable. And really, anxiety is a natural response. The human body is meant to experience anxiety when there's change, because really it's meant to prepare you for the next thing. It's meant to prepare you for potential change in the future. So that's where it goes into going into something more positive. And because people that don't experience change or don't like change, it could be very much so because they've had a negative experience with change, or they haven't had a lot of change in their life. And there are people with certain personality types that really just follow process, no change. And I think it's up to people that have more adaptability and are more adaptable to change to help those people through that. I think we can all think of people that we work with or on our team that are very change adverse. And one of the things that I did within my team here is create some training around how to get people through change, how to get them on board with things, because some people white knuckle They don't want to
Mhm.
change. They can't see themselves doing it. And I think there are ways to get people comfortable with it, but it takes a very personalized approach sometimes based on how they react to being adaptable.
You have me thinking where confidence plays in all of this. Do you think that people who are more confident in their own abilities and skills go with the flow a little bit more when it does come to change?
It's an interesting thought. I guess I never thought of it that way. I think that confidence could be a detriment because they're so confident in their way of thinking.
Mm.
But so it could play both sides. For them, it may be, I was so confident in my thinking. There's no way that change would be good. Or I'm confident in this person or in my own abilities. We got this. We can change. Because I think that's part of a role of a leader is to set that vision and inspire that confidence and show people the way. Because you're going to have, whether it's a team of 2 or 20, you're going to have people all across the board on how much they're willing to adapt, how comfortable they are with it, and how they're going to process and think through it. And I think going back to anxiety, how I use it as a superpower is I anticipate, or at least I try to anticipate all the potential outcomes. So instead of worrying about what would happen, it helps put my mind at ease. Say, well, it could go this direction or this direction.
Right.
And here's what I'm going to do if it goes down path A, and here's what I'm going to do if it goes down path B. It may end up somewhere in between, but at least you've thought through how you might react or how you might address any concerns that happen. And so whenever there's change on the table, how to help people along the way with that is really a goal of a good leader to help your organization through those changes.
You know what this makes me think of, because your story is similar to mine. I went to 13 different schools in different countries,
Wow.
different states, different cities as I was growing up. And I think I went the other direction. I went into trying to control everything rather than to adapt to everything, and became OCD. I was just seriously OCD. So I think there's some of us that get into trying to control, and others who much more wise, like you, will adapt and check out scenarios in the future. So I think each of us approaches things a little bit different. Yours is a much wiser way of using change. It's also, Nicole, one of the markers in Zorkel that we look at is this adaptability. Is a huge marker towards success. It's one of the markers in grit. So for you, you know you have to adapt. You know it brings you anxiety, so you envision different scenarios and then you play it out so you're prepared for any possible outcome. Is it literally that simple, Nicole?
It sounds simple, but I think that's taken years of reframing internally and mentally. What people have told me is a negative thing. Just like you had said, you've developed a different reaction, OCD. There's very much a power in that too. You've got everything buttoned up and analytical, and I think that is a huge superpower that you bring. So while you might not have turned that into adaptability and gone the other way, that's why it's important to have a diverse team and have diverse thinking in the room.
Yes.
So, I keep going back to team, but even a conversation like this, bringing 3 very different people together to share perspectives, I think we can all go away thinking, wow, I think Rebecca can really use what she labels as OCD. That's really what's made her successful in her field. And maybe if we could take a little bit, sometimes one of my mentors told me many years ago, he said, wow, one of the things about you is you go running 100 miles an hour and you look back and your team is in the back there, and you have not brought them with you sometimes. And so that gave me pause. So I didn't have necessarily all the I's dotted, T's crossed, make sure everyone was with me. That forced me to be more intentional about bringing them with me as I was anticipating outcomes or as I was going in a certain direction. So I think there are different ways to look at it.
Wow.
That's incredible. I had a very similar experience once.
Ooh.
I was in a transformational training program, and they were rating us, and I ended up in a category, and it was a pretty high category, but I was there by myself. And I got to tell you, this duality, I felt incredibly successful and incredibly lonely at the same time. Did you ever have that loneliness factor creep in at that point where you were attaining the success, so that maybe you then decided to create the trainings that you're training? Did that play a portion in it?
I think so. I think we all as leaders learn and adapt that way. So there are definitely times where I felt like, wow, we won that one, or wow, that was a really successful initiative. And you look over at your team or the group that you're working with, and you do see people that have lagged behind. And I think it's a powerful message. I think it's an important lesson. And sometimes it's still going to happen, but we have to learn from that. So Tracy, thank you for sharing that story, because I think that's so important, that there are going to be times like that. And how can we reflect on and use that to say, well, how can I, number one, you have to make that right. And then how do you not do it in the future the same way?
Yeah, no person left behind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Nicole, your family life, how does this, I wish there's a way to describe this anxiety. It's not controlled anxiety. You literally have turned it into a superpower. How does this play within your family?
So in some ways it energizes me, because it does give me energy, and I need that to chase all the 4 kids around. We have 4 kids. My husband and I were a blended family, which means lots of things are going on. Anybody with kids, or their kids are grown, remember the soccer games, the martial arts, the gym, the friend gatherings. Oh, and by the way, sometimes you're doing what I call second and third shift. You're going home and getting everyone where they need to go, and then logging back on at night to get those last few things out. So I think that it does give me the energy to do all of that. But that can turn into a negative too, because sometimes I can't slow down. And I think that's one of the, while I call it my superpower, I also have to very much guard myself to stop moving sometimes, and be very intentional about that, and finding friends and colleagues that will hold me accountable for that. But when it's a Monday through Friday and I've got to get 4 kids, I mean, my husband and I have to get 4 kids different places, boy, I do appreciate all that energy.
Wow.
Busy.
Yes, it's almost like nervous energy, but it's managed nervous energy, right? Where it has a very direct application. How am I going to get Johnny to soccer? How am I going to do this? And you're playing it out in your head, but it's a lot of energy behind it that keeps you ironically focused. It's not a scattered energy at all. It's keeping you very, very focused.
And the accountability part too. I love that, like that outside accountability component.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely keeping it organized, playing that calendar Jenga, or Tetris. Some people call it Jenga or Tetris, finding how everything fits. And I think that, it's good for our children and our family to, number one, show that, as a family unit, whether it's a family unit, a team, a group of friends, we are all supporting each other, and we're going to make this work. And one of the things I also learned when it would get stressful many years ago, it's very stressful. I got to get everybody everywhere, different places. You don't have to do any of this. Transition your conversation to, I get to take my kids to soccer. I get to go to work and do something I love every day. I get to cook everyone dinner so we can all eat together. The have to the get to was a huge mind shift for me, and something that I would recommend to anybody who might be under the stress of all of the family stuff that might feel pretty overwhelming in a short period of time at night for especially working parents.
Yeah, it makes it so much more proactive.
Yes.
So with all that going on, talk to us about boundary setting. How, where, when do you set boundary?
Wow. That's one of the hardest things to do, I think, for a lot of us, myself included. I'm not an expert in it. I don't think we can all be experts in it, because, people will constantly ask for things, especially when they know they can come to depend on you or your team. I think boundary setting comes in a lot of different ways. One is, teaching people how you like to be communicated with or worked with, and vice versa. I think that's a give and take. You need to learn how they want to be communicated with and how they like to be worked with. So, you're always going to run across a million different personalities, and somebody telling me they need something in 5 minutes that's going to take 20 minutes while I've got 20 other priorities isn't going to work well for me. So, just having that conversation with them, like, hey, I really want to help you. Thank you for trusting us with this project. Let's talk about what else we have going on right now. We can shuffle some things around, absolutely, but no, it'll impact X, Y, and Z. Can't get this to you in 5 minutes, can get it to you in 10 minutes. And then revisiting that. So having the conversation real time if somebody's asking you something that you feel you need to set boundaries, but then also circling back, hey, can we talk about when you came into my office and asked me to drop everything and do that? Can we just talk about what the impact was on me and the team and how we might be able to anticipate that in the future? I think that that's a big one for all of us, is people don't necessarily understand what they're asking for, especially, I always say especially in marketing because I'm in marketing, but can you just do a quick photo shoot? Can you just do a quick video? And I kind of giggle a little bit. Say, of course you can, but is that what we want to do? So I think that's important in setting boundaries. I think also, if there's any kind of, if there's a conversation with, whether it could be a colleague or a vendor partner or somebody else, if feeling comfortable to go back and be completely transparent with them if they've made you feel uncomfortable or asked you to do something that was somewhat out of your, whether it be your scope, or if they've kind of treated you in a way that wasn't treatable, just finding the courage to have an even-keeled conversation. I know it can get hot right at the moment, but taking a deep breath and circling back with that person and just being completely transparent with them. That's hard. That's really hard to do. But maybe talking through with some of your mentors, I find that helps if you're going to have a high stakes conversation. But if you don't do anything about it, it's going to continue, and that's just not going to be good for anybody involved.
And usually those requests aren't, to be controlling or any of that. It really is a need that they have. They just don't understand priorities at this point. So it's interesting as you're communicating that, the level of empathy and compassion you have. You never invalidate someone by coming back in an angry way. You acknowledge their need, and then you give them a better timeline that works where they get their needs met, and then you renegotiate, right? You've gone into renegotiation in the future. Hey, can we find another way to do this? I want to meet your needs, but this is what's going on with me and my team. So it's this empathy, validation combined with negotiation. It almost seems like a lot of the way your brain works is through a reframing process. You reframe many things to look at it in another way. Would you agree that's what you're going through? I mean, because as you're describing, someone wants this video done, I would instantly go, don't they know who I am? I'm so busy. And I'm exaggerating just a little bit, but you're constantly, it seems like you're doing reframing so you can relate and get the job done.
Yeah, I think a few things. One is my amazing coach always told me, always assume positive intent. And I feel like that really fits well with my personality, because at the end of the day, and I think in franchising especially, we want to help people. We want to solve the problem. And so I've never thought of it that way, Rebecca, but it is somewhat reframing. When somebody tells me, for instance, this is going to cost this much, I just time out. Like, it's not a cost, it's an investment. And okay, so you're concerned about that. Let's talk about what this investment's going to yield. Because I always think there's an intent for positive outcome, and we just need to speak the same language or reframe it in a way that we all can understand. I think that's a helpful way to bring people along too. They may be thinking of it one way and maybe restating what I'm hearing you saying is this, but I might put it a different way. we're all focused on the same goal. And I think that by nature in franchising, especially in the franchising community, all we want to do is help each other and help our franchisees. So we should always look to figure out what's the best possible outcome, whether it be if I'm mentoring someone one-on-one, and say the best possible outcome for this person is that they can go into this meeting confidently. Or for a franchisee, let's get them to reframe what they're thinking is so they can think of this as an investment and what they're going to get out of it.
You're really making me think that adaptability truly, truly begins in the mind. The way you said, assuming that this person wants something positive, always assume positive intent, and then reframing the situation in the mind. So adaptability isn't really just how we respond to a situation. Let me respond differently. It's how am I interpreting the situation? Let me reinterpret, or as Rebecca so brilliantly said, let me reframe the situation and then let me respond to the situation. Would you agree?
I think so. And I think it helps ourselves be adaptable too, because if somebody is pushing back, either they haven't received the communication or understood, or they could be trying to signal something to you to get you to change their thinking. And so I do think kind of the acknowledgement of, you know, if Tracy, you and I are talking and talking about a change and you have a strong reaction, I don't think you would, but if you're like, oh, you know, this would not be good. Okay, well, there's something in there. I hear what you're saying. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because there may be something I'm missing. And I think we always have to be open to that of, we don't have all the answers individually. So if somebody's pushing back, understanding the why and weaving that into your thinking, go, oh, that's a really interesting thought. I didn't think of that. So what if, and then I restate and then work in your thought. Would that work better? Wow. And then, so I think that, you know, it comes down to that relationship. So we talked about being adaptable and communication. I think relationships are at the core of what we do, really. And especially in franchising, we have a pretty tight relationship with our franchisees and depend a lot on each other and with our franchising colleagues. And so understand, you know, because if somebody doesn't feel heard, they're not getting on board under anything. So understanding what their concerns may be and helping them reframe too.
Which goes back to our introduction of you as a combination, this servant mentality combined with this beautiful empathy. And then we add on top of this excellent communicator that is transparent and wants to create a way for us to work together, play together in a profitable, fun, exciting kind of way. And sometimes it is, as Tracy pointed out, simply a mindset or perspective. And once we see we have similar outcomes, then we can change our mindset. We get us back to that level. It's just so fascinating to me. So I have a question as it relates to this anxiety. You're beginning to convince me that anxiety can be a superpower. So thank you for explaining this. Can you give me an example, a story, a situation that you went into and your anxiety was getting the best of you, right? And somehow you were able to reframe, create scenarios, and go into whatever that situation is, or continue in that situation and get through it in a positive way?
Great question. The one thing that comes to mind, because I think it's something that scares people the most, is public speaking.
Oh, yes.
People dread public, maybe not Tracy, but no, public speaking is so anxiety inducing. And what consumes, I think, most people is, I'm going to fail, I'm going to forget, I'm going to stumble. They'll think I'm, you know, they're not going to understand what I'm saying. I'm going to talk too fast. I always talk too fast. But you think of all the bad stuff that can happen. But guess what you're not thinking about? How to prepare for it, how to think of what happens if your microphone goes out, what happens if you forget your stuff. quick answer to that is who cares? The audience doesn't know you forgot about it. So I was incredibly nervous the first time I had to do a live. We did a launch to our franchisees, 700 of them. It was live stream, and the group in the room was about 50 people. And I had to do a 15-minute TED-like talk. And if I had to do it on my own, if I said go out there and talk for 15 minutes, I would have been petrified. But all of these things so I brought all of my worry to the table with a coach. And I said, what if I forget? What if this happens? What if that happens? And we worked through each thing, and it made me feel like, wait a second, this is what I do when I'm creating a new campaign or doing something else with the team. It's the same exact thing. I've made it feel like the stakes are higher. Mm-hmm. So it was just preparing, thinking of all the worst possible outcomes. And instead of me just worrying about the possible outcomes, thinking of okay, so what happens if? Mm-hmm. And constantly going over the what happens if, as opposed to this could happen and it would be the end of it. And for me, that was a real confidence builder. And I think if you can find, if public speaking is the thing that you are terrified of, work with somebody, even if it's a friend or somebody, a colleague, somebody you trust, to do the same thing. Tell them what you're worried about, tell them what you're scared about, and have them put some reason to it. And then just every time you do it, you just get more comfortable. Every time I step up on stage, I still get the jitters. I still get the, what if this happens? But then I've learned that for me, breathing exercises work wonders. And so our last conference, I helped some other people with breathing exercises, and they did amazing. I think it's a confidence builder once you get through it too. Get off stage, you're waiting there for them, and you go, you did amazing. And I think that just getting over that hump the first time, I think, is the biggest challenge.
Yeah, that's so great. And also that anxiety, that surge that you feel before you go on the stage, we can channel that into excitement and animation and gestures. So,
yes.
All of that yummy, good stuff. Slight pivot, though, on the topic of public speaking. Did you share a stage or have some kind of brush with fame with one of the sharks?
I did. So our last franchisee conference, which happened in June, we had a fireside chat with Robert Hershevek. Who's the nice shark.
He's great.
Is amazing. He's the nice shark. He is brilliant, intelligent, humble, personable. And so for our franchisees, we really wanted to give them an inspiring story. And he's an immigrant with this amazing story of coming here with nothing and building this business. And so I got to sit down with him for 45 minutes on stage, which was an amazing opportunity to ask him questions framed from our franchisees. And so it was one of the most incredible things I've ever done. And there's a lot of nerves that come with what if I, this guy's a natural and here I am coming up with him, but he was amazing. And I think our franchisees really enjoyed it. He gave great business advice and was so easy to talk to.
Wow.
I'm just curious, was that recorded? Because I would love to see that. And I'm sure some of our audience would love to see it. Or if it's just for your, just the Kiddie Academy.
It's just for Kiddie Academy. We have some pictures online, but it was just for Kiddie Academy. I know.
Oh, it's brilliant. I got to tell you my story about public speaking. Several years ago, I was doing a presentation in front of hundreds and hundreds of people for Century 21 conference, and I'm a walker. So I do a lot of this when I'm presenting. I'm in heels. I'm on a stage that's 3 feet up or something like that. And I'm walking and I walk right off the stage and fall. Yes, I fall.
Oh my gosh.
I'm in a dress. I'm in heels. I fall off the stage in front of hundreds of people. You would think the next time I would be up would be very filled with a lot of anxiety. But I had prior to that taken a improv class.
Ooh.
which I think is a beautiful way to learn adaptability and deal with these anxiety type of situation. And the improv class basically teaches you how to take these types of situation and turn it around or work with it. So I was able to come up with a ta-da, for my next act, kind of thing, right? So I do think being prepared is one thing, but that kind of thing I probably couldn't have been prepared with. So finding ways to kind of come back from difficult situations. So Nicole, this TED Talk that you're going to get into, is there one or two points that you could share with us? We don't want you to give away your TED Talk completely, but if you had advice to our listeners to take this anxiety that they may be experiencing, growing their businesses or whatever they're doing, what would you recommend?
I think that, always for me, what was helpful is bringing somebody outside in to talk to, whether that be a therapist, a coach, a mentor, or it could be a combination of any of those things. I think that sometimes you need to recognize maybe where that anxiety comes from and help give a name to it. Because I think in the beginning, when people start experiencing it, they don't know what to call it. It's like, what's wrong with me? Is something wrong with me? So finding somebody to help you name it and identify it, I think, is very helpful. That's the one thing I would say. Always be talking to people, whether it be colleagues or maybe starting with somebody who's a bit more in the professional space. But I would say putting a name to it is really important, meaning, Brene Brown talks about being able to name our emotions. Mm-hmm. And I think not only being able to name our emotions, when I was brought up, there was only like probably 5 emotions we could name. Mm-hmm. And, you were happy, sad, mad, glad. But being able to really identify what your emotions are, and also identifying what is it that you're scared of. Like putting the list down of, even if it's, okay, what are the top 3, what's the top 3 things that could go wrong? Most people just stop there. So listing what could go wrong, what am I so scared of? And then saying, well, what are some things I could do to change this path if this happens? I think is really important. I'd also say do things that scare you. I talked to somebody on Friday and she was terrified of networking. And I too used to be terrified of networking. And I said, you know what, after the first 3 times of I said, I'm just going to take a deep breath and just go up and say, hi, Tracy, I'm Nicole. It was really scary at first. And then it was fun. Like I made a game out of it. I'm like, this is great. How many people can I meet? And I've learned so much about people just going up and saying, hi, Rebecca, I'm Nicole. What is it you do? And if you really enjoy learning about people, you find that, that wasn't so hard. So I'm going to circle back with her in a week or 2 to see if she actually did it, to see how she did. But it does take that little push, like do things that scare you. Yeah. I would say is another thing to try.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love that. Recently, I adopted a 5-second rule. Don't overthink it, Tracy. Just do it. Just press that button, hit that email, just make that phone call. Just don't even think twice. Just do it. 5-second rule.
I love that advice. That's great.
Yeah. And in getting in touch with our emojis, and with our feelings, thank God we have emojis, right? We have emojis to help us. So now we're all in touch with our feelings because we have emojis.
That's right. What great advice, though, to actually label it. Because once you label it, there's a way that you can, I shouldn't use the word control. I'm sure there's a better way to describe it, but we can now work with it, I guess is a better way to say it. Get outside input is also super, super important, because I think, to your point, Nicole, when we go into this anxiety, oftentimes I don't think we're aware. We just know it's causing us to not do something or procrastinate or in some way back off. And it may be something very good for us and very healthy for the business, but we don't go forward. And just identifying it kind of almost disempowers it, right? It's like, oh, it's a piddly little piece of anxiety. And now let's look at the 3 or 4 ways that this will play out.
Right.
And I have control of every one of those 3 or 4 ways. So
Yeah. I
Rebecca,
love back what you said. Oh, I love what you said about the improv class. I would highly recommend that folks use the improv method, take an improv class. There's a lot of great local improv groups usually. For me, that was another tactic that I learned to, because then it helps you prepare for the unknown. There's always things you're not going to prepare for. So I just wanted to just really highlight that. I think that was great advice, Rebecca.
yeah.
yeah, it added a piece of humor too, because humor dissolves so many things, right? We can really mess up, but if it's funny, people are more forgiving.
Yes.
They're just much more forgiving. You also use the word reframe and shuffle. Can you address this shuffle idea a little more, and how that plays into your working with your team?
So when I think of shuffling, I think of we always want to go for the best outcome. I remember working with another mentor that I've worked with in the past, and you would go to her and say, "Oh my gosh, X, Y, and Z is falling apart. This is happening, that's happening," and she'd have a big smile on her face and say, "Okay, well, let's figure out how to move this around and make it work." Because at the end of the day, we just need to fix it. I think your team seeing that you're there to support them, and this goes for your family too. If your kids come to you, your spouse, they're overwhelmed. Okay, let's look at everything on our plate. What are the priorities? What needs to happen? What's a nice to have? Just try to reframe it of kind of based on, I always look at things like, is this a high impact or a low impact? Is it a high lift or a little lift? Will you just feel simply better if you get X, Y, and Z done? And what some things that it gives you control of something that can't be controlled. So when there's a lot going on, shuffling things around in a responsible, organized way, I think is helpful. You're not just kind of kicking the can down the road, but okay, let's bring control to this situation that feels completely overwhelming. And let's put things in a kind of reshuffle it and put it in an order that's a bit more easy for us to all get through.
That is so good.
It is so good. I'm visually seeing it on the board, Tracy, is what I'm seeing, where we take all of these priorities, shuffle them in the right order. Something comes up, we reshuffle. It's actually a really beautiful visual.
Yeah.
To think about. So we're kind of coming up on the top of the hour. We want to make sure if someone wants to reach out to you, learn more about your future TED Talk, about anything about the Kiddie Academy, how do they get hold of you?
Absolutely. So if you want to learn about Kiddie Academy, you can go to kiddieacademy.com, or we also have a page on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. That's where some of the more fun, lighthearted things are about our brand. But if you want to learn how we really nurture and inspire children, I'd say go to those sites. Always happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. You can find me under Nicole Salla on LinkedIn. I love connecting with fellow franchise people, people in the industry, franchisees, just because I feel like, having those relationships and being able to learn from each other is just one of the things I enjoy most about franchising. So find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Tracy, any final questions or comments from you?
Oh my gosh, so many. There were
I know.
so many amazing gems and points that came out today. It was incredible. I appreciate you, Nicole. Thank you for being an incredible guest. If Kiddie Academy is any reflection of you as a coach and mentor for your team, I can only imagine the success of the company. And I feel like a lot of our listeners are going to want to reach out to you. I mean, I can't imagine, after hearing this interview, if somebody's interested in franchise, who wouldn't want to work side by side or be coached or mentored by you as part of the team? So thank you again for all of the brilliant concepts that you brought today. I think my favorite from the day is anxiety is my superpower. I love it.
Well, thank you both Tracy and Rebecca for having me. It just flew by, and just really enjoyed talking to both of you.
Thank you, Nicole. And thank you to the rest of you listening in to our show today, The Franchise Woman, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships are forged. We'll see you next week on another episode.